The witching tree. They say it's older than the town itself. The witching tree. A gnarled, blackened beast of a thing standing alone in the middle of the woods like some ancient sentinel. No leaves grow on its branches, and no birds dare rest on them. Some say it still bears the scars of the nooses that once strangled the life out of accused witches centuries ago. For years, locals avoided the area, even during daylight. But we weren't from around here. We were outsiders, drifters looking for a thrill. Every town has a legend, and we weren't scared of an old tree. Not yet. The four of us stood at the edge of the woods, our flashlights bobbing as we moved deeper into the night. The sky, thick with clouds, hid the moon, and the wind howled through the trees like some far-off wail. I remember wondering if it was a bad omen, but I brushed it off. It was Halloween night, after all. What better time to confront an old ghost story? "We should turn back," someone whispered. It was more of a suggestion than a plea, but the weight of the words hung heavy in the air. We ignored it. The forest swallowed us, the path turning into something far darker, more sinister with each step. Shadows stretched unnaturally long, and every twig snap underfoot felt louder than it should have been. My heart beat just a little faster. Maybe we all felt it, the creeping sensation that we weren't alone. But no one spoke up, not yet. After what felt like an eternity of walking, the clearing appeared. And there it was, the witching tree. It was even worse than I imagined. The bark was twisted, blackened, and scorched, as though it had been burned in some ancient fire. The limbs, long and spindly, curled toward the sky like skeletal fingers reaching for something unseen. And those roots, they bulged from the ground, thick and coiled like veins pulsing beneath the earth. It looked like something alive, something waiting. "Doesn't look so scary," someone muttered, trying to sound brave, but their voice wavered. They were lying. The air felt different here, thicker, stagnant. There was no breeze anymore, no sound but our own breathing. The dare was simple. Touch the tree. Just place a hand on it, and we could laugh it off later. Tell everyone back home how we survived the witching tree. Easy. I stepped forward first, adrenaline pushing me. The bark looked rough, but when my hand got closer, something odd happened. The air around the tree seemed to shift, almost shimmer. My fingers brushed the bark and it was cold. Unnaturally cold. A gust of wind came out of nowhere, tearing through the clearing. It shrieked in my ears, and for a moment, I thought I heard a voice in it. A woman's voice, whispering something too low for me to understand. The flashlight flickered, and I could have sworn the branches moved. But trees don't move. I pulled my hand back. There. Done. But then, there was a sound. Something wet, like the squelch of mud being sucked from a boot. My stomach twisted. Behind me, one of the others shone their flashlight at the ground. Blood. Dark, thick blood pooling from beneath the roots. We froze. There was no one else out here. No animals. Nothing. The blood kept spreading, creeping closer to the base of the tree. And then we saw it. Bones. Human bones tangled within the roots, some still wrapped in tattered fabric, others gnawed clean. A sharp, cold laugh cut through the night. We spun around, flashlights darting through the trees, searching for the source. But there was no one. Just us, or so we thought. The laugh came again, this time closer, louder. My blood ran cold as I felt something, no, someone, behind me. I didn't want to turn around. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to leave the woods and never come back. But before I could move, I heard it. A voice. Low and hissing like the rustle of leaves speaking directly into my ear. "You're all mine now." The flashlight flickered again, and for a split second I saw her, a figure hanging from the tree, swinging gently in the non-existent breeze. Her face was hidden, but her mouth, God, her mouth was smiling, wide and cruel. I stumbled backward, my foot catching on something, one of the bones. Panic seized me as the ground beneath the tree trembled and the roots began to move. Slowly at first, but then quicker, writhing like snakes. They slithered toward us, hungry, searching. "We need to go!" someone shouted, but it was too late. The first scream came from behind. We spun around and one of them, was gone. Just like that. No trace. No sound. The tree groaned, a deep, guttural noise that made my skin crawl. I looked back up at the branches, and there, hanging beside the figure, was another body, fresh, still twitching. The tree was claiming us, one by one. And then the whispering started again, louder this time. It wasn't coming from the tree. It was coming from the ground. The Witching Tree, Part 2. We ran. I don't know which of us started first, but as soon as the second scream hit the air, we bolted. The only sound was the frantic slapping of our feet against the ground, the wild thrashing of branches as we tore through the woods. The flashlight beams bounced crazily, casting fleeting shadows that danced like figures in the dark. And in the distance, that tree, the witching tree, seemed to loom, its branches swaying slowly like a predator watching its prey. The whispers followed us. Low, guttural, and maddening, they slid into our ears no matter how fast we ran, as if they were being breathed straight into our heads. Words we couldn't understand but somehow felt wrong, cursed. The kind of whispers that made the hair on the back of your neck stand up, made your heart pound in terror. Someone tripped. I heard the thud of a body hitting the dirt, a sharp gasp of pain. The rest of us stopped, our flashlights swinging wildly in search of whoever had fallen. "Help me!" a voice rasped. It wasn't far, just a few feet behind. We turned to see one of us sprawled on the ground, panting, eyes wide in panic. But then the beam of my flashlight caught something else. At first, I thought it was just dirt, or maybe shadows from the leaves. But no, it was moving. Something dark and slick, curling around their ankle like a snake. One of the roots. "Get it off!" they screamed, thrashing against the ground. The root was tightening, pulling them slowly, but with an eerie calmness, back toward the clearing, toward the tree. We rushed forward, grabbing their arms, trying to yank them free, but it was like the root had a mind of its own. It writhed and slithered, wrapping further up their leg, twisting and squeezing until we heard the sickening crack of bone. Blood sprayed from the wound, but the root didn't stop. It was pulling harder now, dragging them inch by inch across the ground. Their screams filled the air, sharp and desperate, but nothing seemed to work. Someone grabbed a rock, slamming it down on the root, but it didn't do anything. The root was wet and pulpy, but it moved with purpose, undeterred by our attempts to break it. And then, just like that, the ground seemed to open. 1 second they were there, and the next they were gone, yanked under as though the earth itself had swallowed them whole. Their last scream echoed in the air, long after the forest had fallen silent again. We stood there, frozen, staring at the spot where our friend had just vanished. The dirt was still, save for a faint twitch where the root had retreated back into the ground. The smell of blood lingered, thick and metallic. "What the hell is happening?" someone whispered, their voice shaking. No one had an answer. We were all thinking the same thing, though. The tree wasn't just a legend. It was alive. And it was hunting us. I wanted to run. God, I wanted to run so badly, but something about the forest, something about the air itself, felt wrong. It was like we were being funneled, like there was no way out. And that whispering, it was louder now, more insistent. The flashlights flickered again, dimming with each pulse. I slammed mine against my hand, trying to get it to work when I felt it. A hand on my shoulder. I froze, cold sweat trickling down my spine. Slowly I turned my head, expecting to see one of my friends, but it wasn't. There was no one there. The pressure on my shoulder tightened, and I spun around fully, the flashlight beam swinging wildly. The trees around me seemed to shift, their branches stretching toward me. My breath caught in my throat as I saw it, the figure from earlier, the one hanging from the tree. Only now she wasn't hanging. She was walking, her feet dragging through the dirt, her head lolling unnaturally to one side. And that smile, that impossibly wide smile, was back, gleaming in the darkness. She was coming for me. "Run!" someone screamed, and I didn't need to be told twice. We bolted again, this time not even bothering to look back. The woods seemed to stretch on forever, the path twisting and turning in ways that made no sense. The trees blurred past, their trunks warping in the shadows. That's when I realized. We weren't running away from the clearing. We were being led back to it. The tree was there again, waiting, its branches outstretched, welcoming us home. I don't know how, but we had circled back. The clearing stretched out before us, dark and foreboding. The roots at the base of the tree shifted, curling like the fingers of some hidden beast. But something was different this time. There were more bodies hanging from the branches. Not just one, not two, but 4. The light caught their faces, twisted and broken, but familiar. It was us. Our own bodies swayed gently from the branches, eyes open, mouths contorted in eternal screams. We were already dead. The realization hit like ice. The tree hadn't claimed us yet, not fully. But it would. The whispers grew louder, almost frantic now, and as I looked down, I saw the roots crawling toward us, faster this time, like they couldn't wait to finish the job. "Please," someone whispered beside me, but it wasn't one of us. It was the voice of a woman, soft, broken, pleading. I turned, and there she was, standing at the edge of the clearing, her noose still tied tightly around her neck, her eyes hollow and black. "We never leave," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rising wind. "Not until the tree is done." The sight of our bodies hanging from those cursed branches shattered any hope we had left. My stomach turned, bile rising in my throat, but I couldn't move. None of us could. We were paralyzed, staring at our own corpses swaying gently in the breeze that wasn't there before. It was like the tree itself was mocking us, dangling death right in front of our eyes. I don't understand," someone muttered, their voice barely a whisper, as if speaking too loudly would make it all too real. But there was nothing to understand. The tree was playing with us, and it wasn't done yet. The woman with the noose around her neck stood at the edge of the clearing, her hollow eyes fixed on us, her cracked lips twisted in a grim smile. There was no warmth in it, only hunger. Her body swayed unnaturally, as though the invisible rope still controlled her every move. She didn't belong to herself anymore. She belonged to the tree, just like we would. "Why?" I forced out the question, my voice shaking. "Why us?" Her eyes snapped toward me, and for a moment I thought I saw something human in them, something that remembered what it was like to be alive, to be scared. But it flickered out as quickly as it came. Her smile widened. "You touched the tree," she hissed, her voice carrying on the wind like a rustle of dry leaves. "Now it will take what it's owed." Behind us, the whispering grew louder, more frantic. The ground beneath our feet trembled, and the roots began to stir once more. I saw them slithering through the dirt, moving toward us with terrifying speed, like predators that had finally cornered their prey. "We need to move," someone gasped, but their voice was shaking, brittle with fear. I tried to run, but it felt like the air itself had thickened, weighing us down, dragging at our limbs. I turned toward the woods, desperate for any escape, but the trees seemed to close in, their gnarled branches reaching out like claws. No matter where we went, the witching tree was there, its roots spreading far beyond the clearing, pulling us back into its web. A scream cut through the night, sharp and gut-wrenching. I spun around, heart hammering in my chest, just in time to see one of us being lifted into the air by a thick black root. It wrapped around their waist, squeezing so tightly that blood oozed between the coils. Their eyes bulged, and they thrashed wildly, but the root just pulled tighter, like a python suffocating its prey. There was a wet, tearing sound, and their body jerked violently before going limp. The root snapped upward, yanking them into the tree's gnarled branches. A low creaking followed, and suddenly their body was hanging from the tree, just like the others, lifeless, swinging. Their eyes stared blankly down at us. "No!" one of the others screamed, stumbling backward, their hands flying to their mouth as they fought back vomit. But there was no time to mourn. The roots were still coming, faster now, writhing through the dirt like a sea of black snakes, hungry and relentless. I bolted, my legs burning as I pushed myself harder than I ever had before. The whispers were so loud now I could barely think. They weren't just in the air anymore, they were in my head, tearing at my thoughts, promising me things, terrible, horrible things. "You'll never leave," the whispers cooed. "It's already too late." Ahead of me, the woods seemed to shift again. The trees bent toward one another, their branches intertwining like fingers. The path we had come from had disappeared, swallowed by the forest, leaving us trapped in this nightmare with no way out. Another scream rang out, this one cut short by a sickening gurgle. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. There was no saving anyone now. We had come here together, but the tree would take us alone, one by one. The roots lashed at my heels, but I kept running, dodging through the trees, praying for some kind of escape. My flashlight flickered again, then died completely, plunging me into darkness. My pulse thundered in my ears, and my breath came in ragged gasps. I could feel the tree behind me, its presence, vast and ancient, like a black hole pulling me toward it. Suddenly, the ground beneath me gave way, and I was falling. My body tumbled into a pit, crashing against the sides, dirt and roots clawing at my skin. I hit the bottom hard, knocking the wind from my lungs. Pain exploded through my ribs, and for a moment I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. When I finally opened my eyes, I realized where I was. The smell hit me first, rotting flesh and earth. I was surrounded by bones, hundreds of them. some old and cracked, others fresher, still clinging to bits of decaying flesh. And there, at the bottom of the pit, half buried in the dirt, was something worse. It was a coffin, ancient, wooden, and splintered. Its lid had been pried open, the interior black with age. But that wasn't what made my blood run cold. Lying inside was a body, not just any body. It was the woman, the witch who had spoken to us. Her skeletal form lay twisted and broken, her noose still tied around her neck, frayed and caked with dried blood. Her eyes snapped open. Before I could scream, her bony hand shot out of the coffin, grabbing my ankle with a grip so tight it felt like iron. The ground beneath me shifted, the bones grinding together as the pit began to close in. Roots slithered down the sides, twisting around me, binding me to the earth. Her mouth moved, but no sound came out. Instead, her eyes bore into mine, wide and wild, filled with rage. And then, through the silence, I heard it. "Free me." I shook my head, trying to pull away, but her grip only tightened. The ground was swallowing me, pulling me down into the darkness. Her voice echoed in my head, louder now, more desperate. "Free me or take my place." And that's when I understood. She wasn't the curse. She was its prisoner. Just like we were about to be. Her skeletal hand gripped my ankle with an unnatural strength, and the pit seemed to close in around me, the darkness growing thicker. The whispers swarmed in my mind, louder and more insistent than ever, demanding my surrender. But through the fear, through the overwhelming horror, I felt something else stir inside me, a faint spark of defiance. I wasn't ready to die here, not like this. The witch's hollow eyes burned into mine, her mouth still forming those soundless words. "Free me." In that moment, something clicked. She wasn't just a victim. She was part of the tree's curse, a prisoner bound by the same ancient forces that had claimed the others. And I had a choice to make. Either I would give in, let the earth swallow me whole, or I could try to break the cycle. I reached down, grabbing her wrist with all my strength, and something in the air shifted. The whispers grew louder, angrier, but I wasn't listening to them anymore. "You're not taking me," I growled, pulling her skeletal hand free from my ankle. Her grip was ironclad, but I yanked harder, fighting against the pull of the pit. Suddenly, the roots slithering around my body recoiled, as if burned. The bones beneath me shifted and crumbled, the pit groaning as though the ground itself was protesting. The witch's eyes widened, her skeletal form trembling as I continued to pull her hand away. "Free me!" her voice rasped, this time aloud, clear and desperate. I understood now. She wasn't asking for release from the tree. She was asking for something else entirely. "I will," I whispered, though I wasn't sure if it was true. "I'll break this." With one final desperate pull, I tore her hand away, her skeletal form collapsing into dust and bones. The pit stopped closing in. The roots, which had been coiling around me like snakes, froze, then withdrew entirely. The air in the clearing shifted, and for the first time since we had entered the woods, I could breathe. But it wasn't over. The witching tree stood looming above me, its branches twisting and swaying, as if angered by my defiance. I could feel the curse pulsing through the earth, feeding on the terror, the despair of those who had fallen before us. The tree wanted blood. It wanted us, but something told me that if it could take, it could also be given. I stood slowly, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on me, and turned to face the tree. I was no longer running. I wasn't afraid anymore. The sky above began to lighten, just slightly. A break in the clouds allowed a sliver of moonlight to pierce the clearing. And in that soft glow, I saw the tree as it truly was, old, twisted, and bound to something far darker than anyone could have imagined. It was feeding on us, on our souls, on fear. But maybe, just maybe, I could give it something else. Without hesitation, I took a step forward, toward the base of the tree. The whispers returned, louder, more insistent, but I pushed them aside. This wasn't about fear anymore. I reached out, pressing my hand against the rough, gnarled bark. It was ice cold beneath my palm, and I felt a surge of something. Power, hate, a deep, dark hunger. The tree wanted to consume me, to drag me down into its roots like the others, but I wouldn't let it. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and whispered, "Take this instead." I focused on everything the tree had taken, the lives it had destroyed, the fear it had fed upon for centuries. But instead of letting it fuel the tree, I did something the curse hadn't expected. I forgave it. The witching tree wasn't just a monster. It was a victim, too. a victim of the rage, the pain, the torment of those who had been wronged long ago. It had been twisted by hatred, bound by darkness, but maybe that wasn't all it had to be. "I forgive you," I whispered, my voice steady, "and I release you." For a moment, nothing happened. The clearing was silent, the tree looming above me, its branches still curling toward the sky. And then, slowly, the roots began to retreat. The bark beneath my hand warmed, the dark, twisted branches above me shuddering as though something deep within the tree was breaking free. A light, faint at first but growing stronger, began to glow from the heart of the tree. It pulsed with a gentle warmth, spreading through the clearing like a breath of fresh air. The roots receded further, shrinking back into the earth, and the air around us softened, no longer thick with malice. The faces of my friends, still hanging from the branches, flickered. Their eyes, once frozen in terror, began to soften, their bodies relaxing as if released from some unseen force. One by one, they vanished, their souls freed from the curse that had bound them to the tree. The witch's form, now a pile of bones at the base of the tree, shimmered and began to dissolve into the wind, her final whisper echoing softly through the clearing. "Thank you." The tree stood tall and silent now, no longer the dark, menacing creature it had once been. Its branches stretched toward the sky, peaceful in the soft glow of the moonlight. The curse was broken. I stepped back, my heart still pounding, but now with a sense of calm. The others, my friends, had been freed. The tree had been freed. And somehow, against all odds, I was still standing. The woods were quiet now, peaceful. The path before me was clear, no longer twisted and distorted by the curse. I walked away from the clearing, feeling the weight lift from my shoulders with every step. The witching tree was behind me now, its long, dark history finally put to rest. And as I reached the edge of the woods, the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, warm and welcoming. I was alive. We had survived. The nightmare was over. The witching tree would never claim another soul. And as I walked away, I couldn't help but feel a sense of peace wash over me, knowing that whatever darkness had bound that tree had finally been laid to rest.